we founded Lendio back in 2011. It's been a journey, and we help small business owners get access to capital. So you go to one place, fill out an application, get access to many different loan options. We have a little over 100 million in revenue and a few hundred employees and whatnot. But this is a journey, man. This isn't straight up and to the right. It is a lot of peaks and a lot of valleys. I talk about my career honestly through, I kind of say, my 5 fetal position moments. These are moments when legitimately, not theoretically, but legitimately on the ground, fetal position, not sure how we're going to make it to the next day. And they're not all right at the beginning either. There's been recent fetal position moments as well, where you are so overwhelmed with stress and emotion and fear that you're not quite sure hour to hour how you're going to make it through, so anxious to share some of those fetal position moments today.
Oh, I couldn't ask for more. This is fantastic. We're all smiling here for those of you listening, because we all understand this fetal position. I had one client who also used the blanket of death over his head. And when he went home, Mama Bear says to the kids, "Do not touch Dad. He's under the blanket," because it was that bad. Blanket of death, no question. Fetal position. You're right on. And Ike, you and I have gone through so many of these that we're just smiling like, oh. And it's an important point too. Brock said just now, it wasn't just at the start. It still continues. You still have these moments. And that's a very important message. As you hit every plateau on the tier step way to the top to the right? There's always a challenge.
No question.
Sometimes it's a plummet. Then you come back up, hopefully higher than the previous position.
In the beginning, in the beginning, it's like, am I gonna make it? Is this gonna make, like, I'm putting 80 hours a week? Is this gonna account to something? There's like all the emotional weight on your shoulder. When it's growing, it's like, oh my God, am I gonna disappoint my employees? Am I gonna disappoint my family? Like investors, fear of loss, like, oh, just start making money. What's gonna happen? And so every stage has its own challenges.
No question. Yeah, you think, oh man, they've made it. They've got it figured out. They probably have no stress. They're just spending all their time on the weekends, on next to the pool, drinking their lemonade or their Mai Tai or whatever it might be. But that's just not the reality. So, and honestly, if it was like that, it probably wouldn't be that interesting. Honestly, my team, I think they've signed up at Lendio because they like hard. They like the challenge. They now sometimes we don't want to admit that, but if it was kind of just easy up and to the right, I'm not sure that it would be that interesting or we would sign up for it. And so it's when there is challenge, it also creates differentiation and the satisfaction or the fulfillment of overcoming or growing through that is also pretty amazing. And so it's not all bad. There's some really great things that come from it, but the challenges are more difficult. They're more complex. I heard President Obama say something one time that was pretty interesting. This isn't a political statement in any way, but he talked about decision making when you're the president of the United States. He said, all the decisions, and I think it's the same way, not to the same extent, but I think it's the same way as a CEO. The larger you get, the more difficult the decision making becomes. And the reason for that is, he would say, is, if you think about a decision, easy decisions would be like 99-1, meaning 99% of the people would make this decision and 1% would make this wrong decision. And so it's pretty much an easy decision. Like, it's very clear. And the more complex it gets, it starts to be like 80-20, and then it starts to be 60-40. 60% would make one decision, 40% would make the other. So it's still fairly clear. But by the time the decision gets to the CEO, in a larger organization, it's likely a 50-50 decision, or 50.1 to 49.9. Meaning it's really complex. And if it was anything less than that, then probably someone else on your team would have made that decision before it got to you. And it's so complex in so many different parts that by the time it gets to you, it's like not straightforward. There's no easy decisions, anymore. And the fires that you're putting out, if it was a easy fire to put out, someone else would have likely put that out. And so by the time it gets to you, it's hairy and it's complex and it's challenging, it's stressful and whatnot. And so they're fewer and far between, but they're more complex. So there's just different stages, right? Of decision making and complexities and things like that.
Beautifully said, and I'm glad you talked about him. Clinton has done the same too. He's been very insightful. But before moving any further, go back to how the original idea even started. Why did, I almost said funding universe? Why did the business start off, and how did you identify the main problem that started you on this journey? Let's go there.
Great question. So day one, I was a student at BYU, and I had heard about this entrepreneurial competition, that it was not a business plan competition. So they weren't judging the quality of your idea or your business plan. What it was an entrepreneur competition. So we were spending kind of 8 weeks, 100 students, they narrowed us down to 20. And we were 8 weeks going through all these different learnings and competitions around a sales competition, a marketing competition, and fundraising competition, and all these things. And at the end of the 8 weeks, they kind of selected 5 of us and gave us each $50,000 to go start a business. So I was one of those winners. It's kind of like the TV show The Apprentice for back in the day. We don't have that anymore, but we reference it. Excuse me. So I was one of those 5. And so I had that $50,000, and I was going out and trying to figure out what I was going to do with it. Was I going to buy a business? Was I going to start a business? And I was talking to a bunch of other companies. Every business owner that I was interviewing seemed to be, I would ask them, what's your biggest challenge? And in almost every case, their biggest challenge was I need access to capital, and they didn't have a really good solution. And at the time, I kind of partnered with a gentleman, not the Microsoft Paul Allen, but the local Utah, my family Paul Allen. I partnered with Paul Allen and my co-founder Trent Miskin, and there was this concept of, hey, well, maybe we could create this dating concept to be able to help entrepreneurs who needed capital to efficiently connect with investors that wanted to deploy capital. And so we created what Binoy kind of described as funding universe, which was connecting them through a kind of a dating website. You post your business plan and you hope investors come. And we had kind of a speed dating event we called speed pitching, where you'd get table to table and you'd have 5 minutes to go pitch to a room full of investors. And we were building this business and trying to solve that initial problem that we had found. And what we realized through a few years kind of banging our head against the wall and making every mistake in the book was that, yes, that problem was a very large problem, big market, big challenge, but the solution to the problem that we were delivering was the wrong solution. So sometimes you can identify the problem, but the solution is wrong. And so what we said was the problem still exists. The solution to the problem was the wrong solution. And why do I say that? Only about 1% of the people that are trying to raise money from an investor are going to raise money from an investor. The overwhelming majority of small businesses in America are Main Street America. They're restaurant owners and landscapers and dry cleaners, and they're not going to really raise money from an angel or venture capitalist. And so we just were like turning away 99% of your customers. I mean, I'm no mathematician, but I'm pretty sure turning away 99% of your customers because they're not a good fit is not the right business model. So we started working on nights and weekends, kind of thinking of like, okay, but most of those customers probably could get a loan, and probably it's the best way to solve their capital problem is helping them get a $25,000 credit card or helping them get a line of credit or helping them get an SBA loan. So we started kind of dreaming up this concept of Lendio, and taking this demand of capital and applying it through lending instead of equity capital. And that's really when and how Lendio started.
Nice pivot.
Yeah, huh? But that took how long? Because I want people to hear, how long did that take before the
Oh, it was 5 years at Funding Universe, trying to figure out how to make that work. At least one of the fetal position moments, actually two of the fetal position moments were during those 5 years. One of them, we ran out of money. And the second one was the transition from Funding Universe, because we built up Funding Universe to about 10 million in revenue. And it was bubblegum and duct tape trying to piece this thing together. And not a great business model. But yes, 5 years building that up before we started and we transitioned it to Lendio in 2011.
I'm jumping in. I hope you don't mind. I love
No,
first fetal position, not having money.
Yeah.
What happened? What did you do to get past that? If not, what did you do to change your mindset to deal with that?
Yeah. So the first fetal position moment. So I won that $50,000 and we started deploying that, right? And this was a stage of business that I like to describe as playing business. It was fun to build out your website and print your business cards and tell people you're an entrepreneur and it's like a game. And but we weren't generating any revenue. We weren't, we didn't have product market fit. And we just kind of thought $50,000 was a lot of money to us at the time, that thing was gonna last a long time. And I remember it was not too long after we'd started, we had eight team members, and it was December, and it was the payroll before Christmas. And I remember realizing, it was one evening, realizing that payroll was Friday, so probably December 15th-ish, that we weren't going to be able to make payroll. And I remember just the feeling of, how could this happen? How could we put ourselves in this situation? How just beat myself up. Stupid am I that we were doing this and we just weren't, some of the revenue goals we had, we weren't hitting or generating really any revenue. And just feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, right? And not sure, like, this is the end. We're done. We're running out of money. And so I went to a friend of mine who was a mentor and had capital, and I went and kind of sat down with him and kind of poured out my heart and said, "Hey, please help me. Lend me some money, invest some money to help me make payroll." And he said, "Let's sit down. Let's talk through this." We sat down, and he said, "I'm sorry, Brock, but I'm not going to give you any money." And I'm like, "Oh, are you kidding me? What am I going to do? How am I going to solve this?" He's like, let's talk through this. He's like, "But I'll mentor you and how we can come up with a plan." And I'm like, mentoring is not what I need right now. I appreciate the help, but he's like, "No, let's talk through it." We sat down and we started talking through it. And we did come up with a plan. He said, "The problem is, Brock, if I give you the money, you're not going to learn you're not going to learn the lesson you need to learn." And I'm like, "What's that?" And he's like, you don't have any revenue. You haven't generated product market fit. Like, you don't have a real business. Giving you money is just going to delay the inevitable. Let's talk about where you're at. So we spent a bunch of hours that week talking through it. And I went to my team on, I think it was Thursday or maybe Friday, and I pulled the group together and I said, I've got something I need to talk to you about. I said, I've got bad news and I've got some good news. And And I said, the bad news is that we're not going to be able to make payroll today. And I said, but I've got some good news. And it really wasn't good news. I said, I've got a plan. Like a plan. Plan's not going to do it. It's not going to cut it. I walked them through this plan where I was hoping that they would join me in trying to solve this problem. And I'd pay them through stock options. And I walked them through this 3-month plan of how we could get product market fit, and everyone would focus on revenue and driving customers. And I said, listen, I know, I get it though. I can't pay you. So I would encourage you to go home, take the weekend, talk to your spouse, consult your family, see if you can make it work. It may not even be a reality that you can, accept payment and stock option. And if you're in, you'll show up on Monday. And if you're not in, I might be the only one that shows up on Monday. But I get it, because I can't pay you. So take the weekend, stressful weekend. I'm not sure if, we're done. I'm going to have to go find a real job or what. But Monday comes around and all 8 team members showed up. And what was amazing about that experience was it taught me a couple things. The first thing it taught me was people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and they'll sacrifice a lot if they believe in it. And I felt that people believed in what we were doing and wanted to be a part of it, and they were going to sacrifice their own kind of income for a couple months because they believed in it. The second thing I learned was truly, my mentor was so wise in that revenue kind of cures a lot of sins and a lot of mistakes. And so really figuring out, do you have a product or service that people will pay for, that is valuable, that will solve a problem? And so, that maniacal focus at the beginning of nothing else really matters except for product market fit. And so we were pretty kind of, 100% focused on that for the next few months. And once we were able to get product market fit, now raising money from someone is a different experience, because now you have proof that, as they say, the dog will eat the dog food. So that was kind of fetal position moment number 1. And fortunately had a great, wise mentor that helped guide me through it and get us to a point where if we hadn't, if he would have given us money, we probably wouldn't be in business today.
Fantastic. I know Ike's got some thing. I will tell you right now, as soon as you said, and on Monday morning, all of them showed up, I almost cried just listening to their story, because I've had that so many times, because you care so much for the business, you care so much for the employees, and you choke up when you see them supporting you and believing in the same vision of what's going on. When you said that, I did this, those who are watching, rubbing my nose, trying to avoid the sniffles from spring allergies. Ike, comment.
Now, obviously, it's so important to choose the right team members, and also in the early days, and also give them the right message so that they are part of the the force that's going to lift the entire company, right?
Yeah. At the same time, though, he did the right thing. He shared with them full transparency, no hiding. This is what it is. And yes, there's a plan, but still, it's a difficult swallow to go up and tell them, it's not going to work, guys. Sorry, I can't meet payroll just before Christmas. I don't know what this means. So
yeah, and it was amazing that they're willing to take a chance on the business and what that meant and the risk they were taking, and it was. I'm so grateful that they did take a chance. Yeah.
And how about you, Barak? How about you? Like, what got you through that weekend? like, should I just leave, find the regular job, you said, right? Like, what was your mentality coming back to it, and then like knowing that this is going to be a struggle at least for the next 3 months, and then you probably realized, there will be more ups and downs. So what was your thought process?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things that when I get into those fetal position moments, the first kind of line of defense or I mean, it's just my wife. Um, my wife is just a rock, and I remember one of the fetal position moments that I had most recently. It was during COVID, um, and it was an enormous problem. And our business was definitely at risk during the Paycheck Protection Program. And we were flying very close to the sun because we were helping hundreds of thousands of small business owners get access to the Paycheck Protection Program. And one of the lenders that we were working with was not conflicted. They had a significant challenge in fulfilling the loans that we had placed with them. I mean, it wasn't us, it was the lender, but we were the one who was handling the customers. And without getting into all the details, it was hundreds of thousands of small businesses and billions of dollars at risk. So much bigger problem. And I didn't think that the lender was going to be able to come through with it. And so I was, and this was in the height of COVID, and everyone was kind of locked down and everything. And I remember being in a makeshift office in our house, on the ground, literally crying in fetal position, and because I had so much weight and a lot of public profile risk. I had been on, CNN. I was kind of the face of the Paycheck Protection Program during this time because we had helped so many small businesses. And so CNN and Fox News and, every kind of public, national news station. And so there was a lot of press around it and everything else. And I remember my wife had gone out and reached out. We are somewhat we are a faith-filled family, and she had reached out to all of my family and asked them to pray on my behalf. And she had asked my kids to do some genealogy work, kind of reaching out to our ancestors, because we felt like there was some power in that. And I didn't know this at the time. And she came up and said, kind of, get off the floor. Let's go. You got this. You can do this. And I've got the kids doing this, and I've got the entire family praying for you. You've got the strength. You've got the skills. You can do this. And she kind of just pulled me out of this funk off the ground to be able to say, I believe in you. And I think half the battle when you're in these moments is like, who have you surrounded yourself with?
Yeah.
Who are the people that are in your corner when you're at your moments of weakness, that'll come and they're going to lift you up, and they're going to believe in you, and they're going to inspire you and whatnot. It's usually my wife, but it's my business partners. It's my siblings. It's close friends. But in this case, it was her, and it was the exact kind of inspiration that I needed at the time to say, all right, we're going to solve this. I don't know how we're going to do it, and I only have a few hours to be able to make it happen, but somehow we need a miracle, and we're going to go do it. And a miracle happened, and we ended up getting through it. But it was all because my wife was like, I know something's going on up there. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know all the details. I know he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. I'm going to go, make it happen. And so I'm super grateful for her, because she is strong, and she is inspired, and she, is kind of my rock.
That's great. I love the story. Kudos to your wife. For our founders listening, like I remember, like I was so heads down on my business. Like the loneliness comes from not being able to talk to many people. Like I spent so much time with the people at work, but you can't talk to your problems to them. The investors, I was lucky. I had some investors where they prided themselves, hey, am I the first call? So that was helpful. But I know so many of my CEO friends can't even call their board members, too dangerous. Because if they lose faith in you, it doesn't work. And I didn't build any friends outside because I was so busy building my business, and it's like heads down and do it. Now I'm doing this again. I I am spending enough time outside building my relationships as well, not just at home, but outside, and picking the right people, from investors to the right friends. They don't have to have businesses similar to mine. They don't have to have success or failure. That doesn't really matter. Some support system is needed.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that about investors. So I think our early, part of my career, I was really scared to share bad news with my investors. How would they think about me, and would they be disappointed? Would they think, I'm not capable? All those things that, you're supposed to be able to handle it. You're the CEO, you're the founder, or whatever. And I've gone through this kind of journey where I'm now on the flip side of that, where um, to me, that's how I use my investors. Like, hey, I'm only going to come to you when I have problems, and I want you to be the first ones to know about it. If it's big enough that that's how you can add value. And if I'm not coming to you with problems, then that means I don't have confidence in you, or I don't trust you, or other things like that. And so um, I want you to be my sounding board, my problem solver. And what it does is it creates a different relationship with your investors, where they have the utmost confidence in you, because they actually don't hear as much of the good stuff. They just know, but they also know that, like, this is as bad as it gets, meaning, like, I'm gonna, like, the more difficult problems, I'm gonna call them, right, and we're gonna talk through it. And that's how I use them, and it's totally changed the relationship that I have with my board and my investors. The second thing is I don't go outside of my business partners here and my board members and whatnot. I really don't go to others about business problems. Um,
Mhm.
Now, what I have figured out is I need to have that. I need to create the social system and the other habits in my life such that I am personally able to handle more stress, or my from a health and fitness and mental and emotional standpoint, that I can handle that in the most capable way. And so my support system is more about that
Nice.
mental, emotional, physical, nutrition strength, so that I can handle the business problems versus go to them to help solve business problems, if that makes sense. So I'm very passionate about health and nutrition, um, you know, and like, I have kind of these rules around, you know, what I do and how I eat, and how, working out, and, my competitive side, like, I need to be able to compete and sweat, and all that helps me from a mental and emotional strength standpoint. The relationships that I have, like, I think sometimes we think, oh, we got to just spend more and more and more time in the business. But when the reality is like, spending time, on a weekend trip with my wife recharges the batteries from now I'm better at work to solve those problems.